Welcome to Deep Dive Perspective. Jelani has been visiting Europe. He's been fated by the world as some sort of messiah in Syria. The Blessed Revolution was what many people called it. A lot of Muslims here in Britain were very, very supportive of it. But of course, the reality of Syria is something else. And I've got somebody who is really masterful in terms of his knowledge and understanding and his independent analysis of Syria. Kevork Almassian, who has the channel Syriana Analysis on YouTube. Do like, share, and subscribe to that. Do like, share, and subscribe to Deep Dive Perspective. We need your support. But without much further ado, I want to work out what happened in Syria. What actually led to the fall of Assad? How did a terrorist like Jelani come to power? How are the British, the Americans, and those people who call themselves the bastions of Western democracy and love freedom and want to bring liberation to the world and want equality for women, all these things? How did they end up electing a man who has literally got blood on his hands? What happened? I got Kevork here now. Welcome, Kevork.
Thank you so much, sir, for having me again on the show.
Thank you. And this is the million-dollar question. There was a real mystery about the collapse of Syria. And of course, Russia, there's the Russiagate element on this. There's, of course, what happened to Iran and what happened to the allies of Syria, what happened to Assad, and how did ISIS and Erdogan act as the force which essentially allowed the Anglo-Zionist empire to come and occupy Syria once again?
I think Jelani has been an asset for the CIA and MI6 for a very long time. It didn't start only in these recent years. He was in the Bucca camp in Iraq, and he left in March 2011. And Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi left also in March 2011. They left together. One went to ISIS in Iraq, and the other one went to lead al-Nusra Front, which is the al-Qaeda offshoot in Syria. And this happened on the same month and the same week of the start of what we call nowadays the Blessed Revolution. This is not a coincidence. The same week that the protests start in Syria, you send Jelani from Iraq to Idlib. And okay, that could happen. However, what doesn't happen is anyone who leaves a prison doesn't have the network, doesn't have the logistic, doesn't have the money, doesn't have the forces to start any sort of militant group. But Jelani came to Syria, and it was already, everything was ready for him. And that is Operation Timber Sycamore. He had the supply chains, he had the manpower, he had the weapons, and he had the intelligence support and the political cover, and everything was ready for this man. From the first moment he arrived in Syria, everything was already prepared for him to lead this insurgency against the former government of Assad. In early 2012, the American Defense Intelligence Agency, they have made an assessment in Syria trying to understand who is the driving force behind the insurgency against Assad. And they sent this letter to Barack Obama, later was leaked to the press, that the driving force were al-Qaeda in Iraq,
yes,
including Jelani, the Salafi jihadists, and the Muslim Brothers. This is what is written in the document. And then in February 2012, Jake Sullivan, who was the advisor, or he was working for Hillary Clinton, and she was the Secretary of State back in the day, he sent her an email saying basically al-Qaeda is on our side in Syria. And then we have in 2021, James Jeffrey, who has been the ex-US envoy to Syria, he said to PBS openly, he said in 2021 that Jelani's army has been an asset for our strategy in Idlib. And then you have the former ambassador to Syria, Robert Ford. He left Syria, I think, in 2011. He said, I trained this guy to take him out of the terrorism world and to make him a president. So those are all indications that this guy has been groomed, and he was prepared for this role. And they have created basically a country inside a country, a city inside a city, let's say in Idlib. He had an open borders with Turkey, and Turkey is a NATO country, and the NATO powers were sending weapons and ammunition to him to the tune of $1 billion per year. We're talking about Operation Timber Sycamore spending $1 billion per year on the people of Jelani in Idlib and in elsewhere. Plus, you have Qatar and Saudi Arabia. They poured tens of billions of dollars into the Syrian battlefield. The former foreign minister of Qatar, Hamad bin Jassim, was on a Qatari national TV 2019, or 2019, 2020, and he said, we were tasked to destabilize Syria. And the joint military operation room in Turkey and in Jordan, it included the officers from the American military, CIA, MI6, and Turkish and Saudi and Qatari intelligence operatives guiding the operations inside the country.
Right.
So this was a multifolded operation against the country. And then he said, Hamad bin Jassim said that the head of the Saudi intelligence in 2013. So this guy, his name is Bandar bin Sultan. He was the ambassador of Saudi Arabia during 9/11. And the Saudis played an active role in 9/11, by the way. Their intelligence were involved in it. And then this guy in 2005, he went to retirement. And then he came back in 2012. They brought him back to the head of the Saudi National Intelligence, and this is the time when ISIS was spawned and ISIS was created and expanded in the region. Hamad bin Jassim says that the Saudi Bandar bin Sultan asked $2 trillion from the Arabic countries to oust Assad. $2 trillion. And this was the same time when ISIS also started sending car bombs into the Dahiya, the southern suburbs of Beirut, against Hezbollah. The people in the Shias, let's say, in the southern suburbs of Beirut. So all these things, in my opinion, played a major role in destabilizing the country. Plus, you have a big ideological and sectarian indoctrination of the people through outlets like Al Jazeera, not Ayman Zawahiri, the former head of Sheikh al-Qaradawi.
Yes.
He made a fatwa on Al Jazeera saying that it is permissible to kill Syrians, civilians, or in the Syrian army if you are on the side of the government. So this has led to a free spree of killing in the country, sectarian tensions. And the country has been destabilized, weakened. But at the same time, in my opinion, the popularity of Assad was very high during this time because the people were seeing the enemy with their objective eyes. There are militants coming to an area, it gets destabilized. Without these militants coming to an area, it is living freely. There are services, there is electricity, there is bread, there is everything. And so people were able to differentiate who is the enemy. So they supported their government. But then in 2017, when Trump ended Operation Timber Sycamore and changed the strategy into an economic warfare, and this was due to the Caesar Act, it has sent the people, 95% of the people, to the poverty line. And the Syrian currency has become like, everything has become 800 times more expensive. And Syria is a destroyed country, doesn't hold its fuel. Americans occupy it. There are severe sanctions on them. So they couldn't recover from this. And the people no longer see the militants because they all went to Idlib. So nowadays, people are like, okay, we fought for 7 to 8 years on your side, your government, and now we expect you to give us services. We expect electricity, bread, milk for my children. But the government couldn't, let's say, provide these services except for very high prices because they have to import everything from outside. Their infrastructure has been destroyed and there is a ban on the reconstruction of the country. So the popularity of the Assad government started diminishing between 2018 to 2024. And this has led to the demoralization of the people, and including the soldiers, because the soldiers are from the people, right? So I think this is reason number one why the reactivation of the regime change was successful, let's say, in 2024. And then you have these, once Aleppo has fallen into the hands of Jelani, which is a major intelligence failure, because I said on Twitter 3 weeks earlier that Jelani is going to attack Aleppo and occupy it. If I knew about the plan, I don't know how the Syrian secret services didn't know about it. But once the city has fallen, Assad flew to Moscow and he met with Putin, and he came back. In my opinion, he already knew it is over. Because if you want to recapture Aleppo, you have to make months of build-up again, and you have to fight for many, many months again to recapture Aleppo. And there was no appetite in Moscow, and there was no appetite in Tehran to revive this conflict again in the country. And Hezbollah was sent back to southern Lebanon because they had to fight after October 7 against the Israelis. So the country has been opened and exposed. And that's when Erdogan came in. He occupied Aleppo first, and that was the straw, basically. He the last straw in the in the Syrian government's back. And then the Israelis moved and they destroyed the Syrian army completely. Once Assad has fled the country, Syrian army has been destroyed, and they have taken over the country. So Jelani, basically, they have allowed him on a motorcycle to come from Idlib to Damascus to rule over the country. Meanwhile, all the resistance leaders in the region were assassinated. Even in Tehran, they went after Ismail Haniyeh inside Tehran and killed him. Meanwhile, Jelani comes all the way from Idlib to Damascus. Not a single bullet is shot against him. So if the Israelis saw him as a threat, they would have killed him while he was marching from Idlib he was meeting with BBC, with CNN, with Sky News, with every single mainstream media outlet. Meanwhile, there was a bounty over his head. So they let him come to power because Jelani is not only an asset, but also he is the type of a guy who would polarize the Syrian society. His Takfiri ideology will not be accepted by not only the religious and ethnic minorities in Syria, but also the Sunni people in Aleppo and Damascus. They don't adhere to the Takfiri ideology. They are Sufis, they are Hanafis, and there are many other schools of thought that they adhere to. And once Jelani came to power, he also kicked out lots of sheikhs and imams from the mosque and replaced them with the Salafi jihadists in the country.
Well, he went for the Alawites, and of course now I hear that the Christian community is also often is targeted as well. And the Kurds, of course, they were double-crossed, and they've been brought to heel. But there's this idea of balkanization was always on the cards. You always pushed that notion is that's what they wanted in Syria. But coming into the present now, the impact of Syria being in the hands essentially of the Anglo-Zionist empire, literally, I mean, physically, the Israelis still occupy the Mount Hermon or whatever its real Arabic name is. And the Americans still have a large grip on the oil fields up in the northeastern areas, and Turkey still occupies large swathes of Syria. But for the people on the ground, one of the things that, Vanessa was saying to me is that about 30,000 Syrian, whether they were actually soldiers or whether they were Syrian population, when it ended up in Lebanon as a result of this kind of displacement that happened when Jelani comes in. And another 70,000 are purported to have crossed over into Iraq, actual military men. Is there on the horizon, do you see any positivity, any positive signs for Syria counteracting the blessed revolution and maybe unblessing it?
It depends on the war in Iran. If Iran emerges victorious, will definitely have its repercussions on Syria, because the Jelani government or regime, let's call it whatever, it's a result of this regional consensus after October 7 that they have to finish on the axis of resistance. And he has come to power with the blessing of the MIT, with the MI6, and with the CIA. I mean, the guy plays basketball with the head of CENTCOM. And he meets with the most senior officers in the British Army, and they given him just a medal. He meets with the king of the UK. So the guy is accepted among them because he basically allowed Israel to create a buffer zone in the south of Syria, 60 kilometer in depth inside the country. So no heavy weapons, no medium weapons in these areas, only light AK-47s. He allowed Israel to fly freely over the country. And he created the polarization that serves Israel. Now, Tom Barak, of course, there is these differences of opinion how to deal with Syria. America, represented by Tom Barak, who is an asset for the Qataris and the Emiratis and the Saudis, basically, he told the American president that the best way to deal with Syria is to one man, centralized regime in the hands of Jelani, one phone call, we call him, we tell him what to do, it's over. Why do we need to balkanize Syria, several mini states, and then we have to call every single one of them and take care about the interests of every single one of them? Let one guy do the job.
Right.
But the Israelis do not want that. What the Israelis want is a balkanized, federalized Syria. And that's why they created this model in Sweden. Once the Jelani genocidal army moved to Sweden, they were killing people like in the streets. They ask you one question. They say, are you Muslim or are you not Muslim? And if you're Jews, like they kill you on this basis. So the Israelis, because they use such opportunities, they came and bombed the convoys of Jelani and presented themselves as a protector of the Jews. But I have warned the Jews several times. Israel doesn't care about your safety. What Israel cares is a geopolitical depth in the country. It's a ground for them for the future to expand in the country. And this is what they're planning on doing. Now we can see there are so many demonstrations in the south of Syria. They say we want to go and fight against Israel. This is Jelani moving them because he was in Europe. And the Europeans told him, you have to take back your refugees. And he doesn't want to take back the refugees because he wants first the money of reconstruction. And he told them, reconstruction money first, then refugees come back to Syria. So he's moving his assets now in the south, trying to create a scene. On a motorcycle, people say, we want to go and fight against Israel. We will fire missiles.
Right.
What missiles are they going to fire, sir?
Yeah.
What missiles do they have?
Yes.
They allowed Israel to destroy Syria's missile system. They themselves destroyed Syria's air defenses for the past 14 years. So they don't have any capability. But if this situation continues the way it is, and that is what I warn, and I say, Jelani is an asset. And if he moves these people now underground, if he's trying to blackmail anyone in the region, they will knock him out in a second. And if these forces attack on Israel, Israel will come and occupy Damascus. And this is part of the Greater Israel Project. Sir, Israel already occupies Damascus because they occupy Mount Hermon. And by occupying Mount Hermon, it is 19 kilometers away from Damascus. It's the highest hill in the region. If they put their howitzers on Mount Hermon, they would destroy Damascus completely. So militarily speaking and geopolitically speaking, already Israel has an advantage over the Jelani in Damascus. And they're eyeing on Damascus, and they're saying that our borders extend from Jerusalem to Damascus. And I believe that this guy exists there, and at a certain point he will be used, unfortunately speaking, he will be used to trigger Israeli invasion of Syria and occupation of Damascus. And I hope that I'm wrong on this. I truly hope that I'm wrong on this because I have studied this Jelani so much that a person who comes from Bucca is deliberately sent to Syria to lead an insurgency funded by the CIA and embedded with Jonathan Powell, who is everybody knows his relationship with the MI6. And the MI6 has a woman, Claire Hajjaj, inside the presidential palace in Damascus, instructing him about the media affairs and about his politics and how he can appear. This is not a guy who came from a popular uprising. This is a guy, is a product of intelligence, intersection, let's say, of intelligence interests in the region. So he would either be kicked out of power if he disobeys, or he would be used for Israel to expand inside Syrian territories. And that requires, in my opinion, an Iranian victory to change the calculus in Syria. And once the calculus changed in Syria and in Lebanon, the Jelani regime will find himself in a very volatile and exposed situation. I mean, it takes one hypersonic missile to change the situation in Syria anyway, so I'm not going to give more advices to the Iranian officials in this case.
Well, it seems that the Iranians have been stoked so badly that they're now actually stirring. I know there was a kind of muzzle put on the principalists and the hardliners for a very long time. The likes of Mr. Rouhani made sure of that, I think, many others, that there was this veering towards diplomacy, flip-flopping in terms of going back to neoliberal, Zaya Western, wheeling and dealing. that all seems to be now pretty much shot, given that the public in Iran have seen the face of the Americans in a practical way, and rather like the sacred defense, the war that was inflicted on Ayatollah Khomeini's Iran in the first 10 years by the West through using Saddam, which I hinted at. This could be a seminal moment that actually Iran reawakens as that revolutionary force and doubles up its efforts to also reach out to those who say we're oppressed. Because classically, Iran has supported those who've said, look, we've got problems. The Yemeni Ansarullah, the Iraqi, the Shia in Iraq when ISIS attacked, for instance, is another example. Palestinians, when they actually came clean and wanted support, because they were flip-flopping as well for a long time, before Ismail Haniyeh and the likes of Yahya Sinwar were in...
Mishal.
Yeah, Mishal was very much anti-Iran, and still is, I think. So there was that, and then of course Lebanon, you've got the example of Hezbollah, when they called out for support, Iran seemed to react, even though they may have had people who were not necessarily hardliners in power. Is a similar call from Syria likely to evoke that kind of response, given that now the PMUs are not weak in Iraq necessarily, and there's this mood there where Ayatollah Sistani and the Iraqi government has also given permission to the PMUs to stand up and take up a response to the attacks on them. And of course, they're not stupid this time. They're not going to be watching, they're not going to be going to sleep, presumably, if and when Jelani or the ISIS fraternity are reactivated by the Americans to maybe even destabilize Iraq even more than they already are. Do you think that Syria and Jelani may feel the effects of this war? You're hinting at it, that it will, but in what way will that effect be?
Yesterday, he was asked in the Chatham House. So the Qataris paid the Chatham House to receive this guy and give him some PR push in the UK. And he was asked about this war, and he said, we already had 14 years of war in Syria. We're not interested in more conflicts, and that we will keep our country neutral. The problem is, with this type of talk, whether it is Jelani or other leaders in the region, because we listen to this same narrative also among the Lebanese political class, it's not your choice whether you want to fight or not. Even if you chose not to fight, they will fight with you anyways. So even if you say, I'm not interested in fighting you, Habibi, they have the Greater Israel Project. They're saying they will expand to the Litani River. So whether you like it or not, they will try to expand. So it's your choice whether you resist it or you capitulate. Because what comes after southern Litani River, it's the northern Litani River, and they will occupy the rest. And the same goes for Syria. So you have a choice either to resist or to capitulate. And the Iranians have given a model, an example to the people of the region and to the world, by the way, because people were really pessimistic, including myself, especially after Maduro was kidnapped. I was like, it become too scandalous, you know, like they kidnap a president and take it to the United States, and then it's a soft coup in Venezuela, and they have their people now in charge. So what are they going to do with Iran? I was so pessimistic, I was worried. And once the war started and we saw the type of response from Iran, I think they have created a model, an example to the people to say, look, you have a choice. You can capitulate. You will end up again under their feet, or you can fight and win this war and keep your dignity and honor. And I think the success of Iran in this case will normalize to among the state and non-state actors in the global south that resistance is worth it, because this was not the case only a few weeks ago. People were like, too much disappointed by what happened in Venezuela, by what happened in, let's say, Syria, in Libya, in Iraq. So people were asking, where are the Russians? Where are the Chinese? Where are the other players? Why are they not helping them? Why are they not doing something about it, right? But this is the responsibility of the people. Russia is responsible about Russia. China is responsible about China. It's the responsibility of the Iranians. It's the responsibility of the Syrians. It's the responsibility of the Iraqis. When the Americans come to the region and try to create these sectarian tensions, it's not the responsibility of Putin or Xi Jinping to come and tell the people, look, we have to be more mature. We have to know that this is a trap for you, divide and conquer. It is the responsibility of the people to learn from these historical events and grow up and get more matured, because what happened in the region is already an open book for the people to learn. And when people come and say history repeats itself, no, history doesn't repeat itself, but some people do not learn from history. So we hope truly that this would be an example and this would be a lesson for the people to learn, especially in Syria, although I'm again a pessimist by my nature, because people are still, as we say, they're drunk. They're still in a celebratory mode. They think they are free. But what happened is, this is the worst chapter in the history of Syria. They have lost their sovereignty, their political sovereignty, they lost their economic sovereignty, and their future is dependent on the blessing of Uncle Sam. And this was not the case in Syria. And Syria was an independent country, an exporter of products, an exporter of wheat, an exporter of fuel, and now we import everything. Why do we need a Turkish telecommunication company to come and invest in our country? Why do we need any foreign telecommunication or reconstruction companies to come? We do have all the materials and we do have our companies, but once you bring all these players into these investors in the country, even if Jelani leaves in the future, your entire economic model would be dependent on outside support. So you would stay dependent forever. And this is the economic hitman model, that they come and they take over your country, they entrench inside the economic system, and then afterwards they buy the political class, because this is where the money is. And by doing so, they create a long-term dependency in the country. So this is the model that they have done in Syria, which means we need a drastic change, not some opinion change in Jelani, because as I said, Jelani is an asset and he has to be removed. And we have to think about how to establish a political system that we won't repeat the same mistake of the past, creating a system revolving around a person, but rather creating a nation state like the Iranians have done. And they have created a deterrence and leverage in the region, because Syria was a strong player, and we have lots of competent people. We have natural resources. We have a great location. What is missing in the country? Why do we need reconstruction money from outside? We have fuel in the country, but then we have to liberate our country first to take over the fuel and reconstruct our country. And this is not something that Jelani is willing to do.
Yeah, absolutely riveting analysis, Kevork. Really learned a lot myself in this, and I'm sure the audience has. We'd love to invite you back again and again. Do go and follow Syriana Analysis. I don't think you're going to get a better, independent, genuinely analytical and critically, thinking channel, especially on this Syrian issue and well beyond. So I'd encourage that. Do like, share, and subscribe to Deep Dive Perspective, because we as independent producers require your support. Without that, we're at a loss. Even the likes of the Anglo-Zionist owned social media, it tends to block us. I know Kevork has been censored and he's limited in many ways and sanctioned in all sorts of ways quietly by the algorithms. So we need your support. We need you to share these videos. We need you to comment, and we need you to engage with us. And then you're going to get these kinds of analysis, which absolutely won't be on the BBC or the Sky, etc., because it's against the agenda of their deep state to say anything like this. They wouldn't even invite Kevork, the likes of Kevork, who has so much knowledge, onto a debating program like Question Time, when I think he should be. They don't like people like this because they will actually open your eyes and make you ask the questions which lead you to the real answers and bring you into reality geopolitically and otherwise. Do show your resistance, even if it's by liking, sharing, and subscribing. That's part of resistance as well. Just as what we're doing is part of the resistance to the empire, resistance to Anglo-Zionism, resistance to oppressors. It is our duty for the sake of our kids. And I pray that Syria is liberated from the clutches of Anglo-Zionist imperialism. I pray that the West Asia sees peace, and indeed the world sees peace. And indeed I pray for the liberation of the US and those Israelis who've been misled into thinking that they are part of some sort of good guy scenario. We can only have that peace through justice. And justice can only come when good men and the good people are empowered by you. So don't give your votes to the unjust. Keir Starmer, Biden, etc. I've criticized them openly, and I challenge them to come on this show and come on to Kevork's show even. They won't show their faces here because they're liars and they cheat and they kill and plunder. This is their modus operandi. They use your vote, your taxpayers' money, and your system to do that. You need to, I think, rebel. It's not just about Syria liberating itself. Actually, we need to take a leaf out of the book of the Iranian state. What is true sovereignty? There's a price to pay, yes. But the price is worth it if you want freedom and don't want to be subjugated by the likes of Palantir, the technocratic feudalist class, the transhumanist class, those who are, pushing for eugenicism and who are pushing for all sorts of depopulation agendas and pretend that they're pushing climate change and pretend that they're going to bring peace and equality and love and fraternity around the world, democracy. Those are lies. They're telling you lies. And you see, all of those issues are no different from their subjugating of Syria, as far as I'm concerned. They are all connected to the subjugation and the surveillance and the terrorism that's inflicted on Iran. It's all connected. It's all about joining the dots. You won't be able to join the dots unless you have the knowledge. You won't have the knowledge and you listen to the independents, and unless you then use that to create wisdom in yourselves and don't just become sheep and follow legacy media. Thank you for watching, and thank you, Kevork, for your absolutely astonishing appraisal, and we'd love to have you here over and again. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Take care until the next deep dive perspective.